Thank you very much, Sister Lily and Sister Mengsi, for today's puja. Now let us welcome Brother Ananda Fong to begin his Dhamma sharing. Brother Ananda Fong, please be invited.
Thank you for the invitation. Let me share screen. Let me do a short puja for myself. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome back to this session of the sharing. Now, today's topic is about aspirations. But before that, we have to look back closely at our experience, which if we bother to pay attention and heed the messages, it shows us that life is subject to a series of ever-changing conditions. From the top left picture, which you see a lot of plants germinating, and basically to grow something is to change, even for our own self. We grew up from after being born and so on. There is change in our bodies, in our minds, and so on. And we look around us, other than that, the weather changes multiple times a day, sometimes for the better. That means better mean what we like it to be, and sometimes to what we don't like it to be, either too wet, too hot, too cold, whatever is the situation. But change is the underlying factor. And right through our lives also, this picture at the bottom clearly shows that change goes over time. Some change happen very, very quickly. That means some of us are very fortunate. We get a chance to be born. Others are not so fortunate. They do not get a chance to be born. They die before birth. That means in terms of miscarriage. But even after birth also, it doesn't mean that death would not come to us. Children do die, toddlers do die, young children, youth, adults, and whatever age we are, death comes. There is change in our lives. So to be fortunate means to be able to be born, to live a life, and to be able to grow old and pass away. That is what we all hope for. But clearly, all this happens because of change within ourselves. Not just ourselves, everyone around us, our loved ones, and so on. Everyone in society. That's why we have history books. We remember those who have gone past us. So our wanderings in samsara clearly says that being born, living a life, and passing away is not the only time we experience this. The word samsara clearly means the cycle of birth and death. And what does it mean by the cycle? Well, it happens again and again and again ad infinitum. Clearly, the key word is called infinity, which means we are very, very old in this cycle of birth, death. And what the Buddha found underneath the Bodhi tree is depicted in Dhammapada verse 153. He reflected, through many a birth in this cycle of birth and death called samsara, have I wandered in vain, seeking the builder of this house of life. Repeated birth is indeed suffering. Why? Because we experience things which we don't like. We experience things which we like, but it doesn't last, and so on. So life is full of suffering. Now, in the Asu Sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 15, Sutta number 3, the Buddha said, monks, transmigration, or being born again and again, has no known beginning. No first point is found of sentient beings roaming and transmigrating, shrouded by ignorance and fettered by craving. Now, this point is very, very important. For many people, even among Buddhists, But when other people of other philosophies or religions come to meet us, they are always intrigued by what is your religion's viewpoint regarding the origins. And clearly, this is not the only sutta which the Buddha clearly said. No first point is found that answers that question. So the flow of tears you have shed while roaming and transmigrating is indeed more than the water in the four oceans. Of course, provided those tears do not evaporate at all. So over the course of time, the infinity of time, all the tears we have shed, for whatever reason, will be more than the four oceans that we know about on planet Earth. And clearly, samsara is longer, older than planet Earth. So for a long time, you have undergone the death of a mother, a brother, a father, a son, a daughter, loss of relatives, loss of wealth, or loss through illness. From being united with the unloved and separated from the loved, the flow of tears you have shed while roaming and transmigrating is indeed more than the water in the four oceans. And why is that? The Buddha said, transmigration has no known beginning. So that brings home the issue of whether there is a beginning or not. Now, from that particular Dhammapada verse, we are reminded by the Buddha's first sermon, the first lecture, where the Buddha met up with his former colleagues, the five ascetics, the Panchavaggiya. There, he said, thus I heard, this is narrated by Venerable Ānanda in the first council. On one occasion, the Blessed One, or the Buddha, was living at Benares in the deer park at Isipatana, the resort of seers, where he addressed the bhikkhus of the group of five. Bhikkhus, these two extremes ought not to be cultivated by one gone forth from their household life. This first lecture given by the Buddha, the Dhamma Cakka Pavatana Sutta, can be found in Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 56, Sutta number 11. And the sutta continues. Now, the Buddha talked about two extremes, the extremes of self-mortification, that means torturing our bodies, or over-enjoyment. But the rest of the sutta emphasizes this particular point. Problems have solutions. And the Buddha shared with the five ascetics his four great discoveries. For the rest of us, we know them as the Four Noble Truths. Now here, the list of four are what they call shown in the medical context. Now, if you are sick, you will go to a doctor. The first thing the doctor wants to know or wants to perform is the diagnosis. They will ask you, what is your problem? You're having headaches, you're having sore throat, you're having cough, whatever. And in further analysis, the doctor tries to identify its cause, which is called the etiology. It's a big fancy word. For the rest of us, we could call, what's the cause of my illness? Is it a viral infection? Is it a bacterial infection or something else? And of course, once we have the diagnosis and we have the cause, we want to know, is there a possibility of cure? What the doctors call a prognosis. Is it a good prognosis, which means you can be cured? Or a bad prognosis, which means the thing you're suffering from cannot be cured? And of course, if there's a possibility of cure, the next thing we want to know is, how can we treat it? How can we be, alleviated from the suffering that the dis-ease that we are suffering from? Now, on the right-hand side, we have a box giving the key points of the Dhamma Cakka Pavatana Sutta. The diagnosis, essentially the first noble truth, the Buddha says there is dukkha. Now, often translated as suffering, but can also be rendered as unsatisfactoriness. That means not what we like life to be. Things that happen to us, we don't like. Things we want to happen to us, we don't get. Or things that happen to us doesn't last long. It comes and it goes. That is dukkha. And then what is the cause, the etiology of this dukkha? The Buddha identified is tanha, which is craving. It is not desire, but it is craving. Now, to translate tanha as desire causes problems because we can have wholesome desires to want to learn the Dhamma, to practice the Dhamma. So the Buddha didn't say that the second cause of suffering is desire. It is craving. And what's the difference between craving and desire? Craving is rooted in unwholesome roots of greed, hatred, and delusion, whereas desire can have wholesome roots also. So that is a key difference. So to use the term desire is technically wrong. Now, then, of course, if we know the cause, then we want the possibility of cure. In the prognosis, the Buddha identified it as Nibbana, the end of all this suffering, the end of all this unsatisfactoriness. Now, and what is the cause of treatment? Well, the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, as in any medical situation, when the doctor prescribes a course of treatment, if it's a cough and cold, very often we have to take some medicine and so on. The key thing is we have to take the medicine. The medicine can be there, we can see a doctor, but if we don't take the medicine, we cannot expect the cure to be fast. Okay, we might get cured over time. That means our body defenses will relieve itself, will get rid of the virus or the bacteria or whatever, if the prognosis was good in the first place. Okay, so but you want a speedy treatment, a speedy end to this disease, you have to take those medicine. Taking the medicine is called taking action. So the Noble Eightfold Path, by the very word also, is itself an actionable series of things we have to do. It's not a case of just looking at the Noble Eightfold Path, oh, it's very good, and that's it. We won't be cured of samsara. Now, going back to dukkha, what is this unsatisfactoriness the Buddha defined as in the First Noble Truth? The Buddha defined dukkha as birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha. Association with the unpleasant is dukkha. Dissociation from the pleasant is dukkha. Not to receive what one desires is dukkha. And finally, in brief, the five aggregates subject to grasping are suffering or dukkha. The five aggregates compose our very being, comprising our body plus our mind. Okay. Now, moving on, the second noble truth talks about the cause. But to emphasize further about the aspect of dukkha over the years, even at birth, no one has ever reported that when a baby in the delivery room, after labor, when the baby is born, the baby comes out laughing. At least I have not heard one. Okay, if you have ever got actual cases, verified cases that the baby, when it's born, the baby comes out laughing, please do write it in the comments. Okay, I will be interested to know if there's such a case. But the rest of us know from experience, from reading and from personal experience that when babies are born, they cry. Why? There's great discomfort in this birth process, not just for the mother, but also for the baby. So right from birth, there is already dukkha. And as we grow up, we have, as toddlers, as young children, we have experiences of all these. In the top right picture, when the kid shows tantrums, I want that toy. That means not getting what the child wants. That itself is dukkha. Then as we grow up to be teenagers or young in the youth, we have issues about loneliness, rejection from groups, from friends, and so on. Loneliness and so on. And of course, as time goes on, we get older and we lose our friends, and sooner or later, we may be alone, waiting to pass away. And of course, we encounter aspects of, hopefully we have companions that can keep us company, to be not so alone, to feel cared for and so on. All these are aspects of dukkha throughout of life, from birth until passing away. Now, the etiology, the cause, second noble truth, meaning tanha or craving. What is this craving the Buddha identified as the cause of dukkha? It is this craving or tanha, which is translated also as thirst. The thirst, when the person is thirsty, you want to quench your thirst. The constant wanting, which produces re-becoming or being born again, accompanied by passionate greed and finding fresh delight now here, now there, namely craving for sense pleasure, craving for existence, craving for non-existence. And I include this picture frequently, those favorite picture in the cartoon world of somebody being very, very greedy at consuming food. And the prognosis, the possibility of cure, the Buddha identified as nibbana, the ending of dukkha, which is the third noble truth. And the Buddha said, it is the complete cessation or ending of that very craving, giving it up, relinquishing it, liberating oneself from it, and detaching oneself from it. And often depicted in some of the suttas, the Buddha gives an analogy as the blowing out of this constant craving, the flame. Yes. And this is the picture of the blowing out. And the course of treatment, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the Four Noble Truths. Now, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path is critical in the sense that it is a path. And the path is not just to be looked at as a beautiful path, but it brings you from where you are standing to somewhere. A path has to be walked on, not to be looked at and admired. So a path is to be used. If you don't use it, it will not be able to bring you to the destination that is desired. The path, what does it do? Not just brings you to the destination, which is nobility. Hence, the Noble Eightfold Path, noble. It makes you more noble. It transforms you. It changes you. So by trading the Noble Eightfold Path, one can expect changes in your personality, in your psychic, and so on. There must be change. If there's no change in you, then you are not practicing at all. You are not walking the path. So the path ennobles you, makes you more noble, from a hot-tempered person to be a very compassionate, ever-loving person, and so on. There will be changes in your personality for the better, which other people and maybe you yourself may be able to recognize. And what are these factors that you need to practice? They are eightfold. Not Noble Eight Path, but Noble Eightfold, because there are 8 factors. And why fold? Because they interact with each other to support each other, to enable nobility, a noble change in your character. And most of you are familiar with this Noble Eightfold Path, the factors here, often depicted in various books as right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Now, of these eight fold factors, we always start with right or perfect or complete understanding. Why? The important thing is we must realize the importance of this path in relieving our situation, our getting rid of dukkha. Once we understand that, this understanding directs what we think, what we say, what we do, how we live our life, what efforts, what mindfulness we practice, and what concentration we do. But if we have wrong understanding, the thought, speech, action, and all the way down will be all wrong. Okay, that is the important thing. So we have to get that. It may not be perfect understanding yet, but it is that little bit of wisdom and understanding that we have, that we need to learn the Dhamma as taught by the Buddha, so that we can practice all that. Right? All the way walking the path, what happens is that our understanding deepens as to what needs to be practiced, what did the Buddha teach, what tools he advised us to bring up to perfect, so that our practice become more effective and we can achieve nobility towards the end of the path. Now, of course, that the earlier slides were somewhat technical, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and so on. But putting it in everyday language for the lay person, the everyday person. What is it in it for us? And of course, we say end of dukkha. But in this particular sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter number 4, the Buddha says, monks, I am freed from all snares, both human and divine. You are also freed from all snares, both human and divine. The Buddha was speaking to the first 60 enlightened disciples of the Buddha, soon after the first and second lectures the Buddha gave. And he encouraged these monks, wander off, monks, for the welfare and happiness of the people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, happiness of gods and humans. Let not two go by one road. That means he wants them to go in different directions. But the key issue in the middle portion of this page is that the Dhamma is for our welfare, for our happiness, for our benefit. That is another way of saying what use is this, the Buddha Dhamma taught by the Buddha. And why do the monastics teach it? Why is there sharing of this important Dhamma Vinaya or the teaching of the Buddha? It is out of compassion for the world that it is being taught. And the sutta continues. Teach the Dhamma that's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, meaningful and well phrased, and reveal a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure. There are beings with little dust in their eyes. They are in decline because they haven't heard the teaching. There will be those who understand the teaching. The last 3 lines is very, very important. The Buddha recognized that there are beings with little dust in their eyes. So not every person the Buddha taught can understand what the Buddha teaches, can understand the teachings. So there are some who have little dust, which means their vision, their understanding is not hindered, is not obscure. And he encouraged those, do not be disappointed when we try to teach some other being, but they don't seem to understand, or they ignore, they may ridicule you and so on. Okay, but there will be those with little dust in their eyes, and they will appreciate the teachings and they will implement, learn the teachings and practice to tread the path. Now, this particular advice is not just given in the sutta identified earlier in the Samyutta Nikaya, it's also found in the Vinaya Pitaka, the Mahavagga. Now, our wanderings in samsara, the Buddha clearly says in the Dhammapada 414 that there is a possibility of ending it, as given in the Four Noble Truths. But in this Dhammapada verse 414, the Buddha said, he who having traversed this miry, perilous, and delusive round of existence, or samsara, has crossed over and reached the other shore. This is given by the picture of that island across there. This person who is meditative, calm, free from doubt, and clinging to nothing, has attained to Nibbana. Him do I call a holy man. So clearly, again, in this Dhammapada verse, as elsewhere in the teachings of the Buddha identifies that there is a possibility of reaching the other shore, the attainment of Nibbana, the freedom from dukkha. And for himself, the Buddha also said in Dhammapada verse 154. Earlier, 153 was talking about him wandering in samsara, looking for the builder of this house. Now, after attaining enlightenment, the Buddha declares for himself, O house builder, you are seen. You will not build this house again, for your rafters are broken, your rigid pole shattered. My mind has reached the unconditioned. I have attained the destruction of craving. So for the Buddha himself, he has destroyed his tanha, his craving, and he has attained nibbana, or unconditioned. So again and again, I emphasize here the from different angles, the aspect of change, the aspect of dukkha, there's the cause of it, the prognosis, the possibility of cure, and the Buddha's encouragement to the monastics, the enlightened disciples after him, to also share the Dhamma for our welfare, for our happiness, for our benefit. But for the rest of us, everyday life, normal human beings, we have desires. We want this, we want that, and so on. And in this particular sutta, the Ether Sutta, the Buddha says, House Lord, in this case, the Buddha was talking to some lay people, there are these 5 things that are desirable, beloved, and agreeable, but difficult to obtain in the world. What are the 5? Normal beings want long life, beauty, happiness, fame, and at the end of their life, rebirth in heaven. Notice in this sutta, the Buddha didn't talk about attaining the unconditioned or nibbana. He's talking about to lay people. Lay people are not normally interested in nibbana, but these are the 5 things normal lay people want. Of these 5 things, House Lord, I do not teach that they are to be obtained through prayer, nor through wishing. Now, this underlying portion is very, very important. The Buddha said he does not teach that they are to be obtained through prayer, nor through wishing. So in this sutta, the Buddha clearly says that in Buddhism, or at least what the Buddha taught, there are no Buddhist prayers. Okay, there's no mere wishing. Prayers means to ask somebody, all-powerful being, to grant you something that you cannot obtain through your practice. So here, the Buddha doesn't teach that. The Buddha does say that you cannot obtain it through prayer. And what did the puja we did earlier? That was not a prayer. There was no asking for this, that, and everything. That was a reflection on the Dhamma as taught by the Buddha. So the whole puja is in that fashion. But many people from other religions mistook that as prayer. That is called wrong understanding from their point of view. As Buddhists, we should understand what we are performing during the puja. So continuing, if one could obtain them through prayer or through wishing, who would not obtain them? Because over the centuries, over the millennia of evolution of humans, people have been praying for good weather, for good hunting trips, and so on. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. And the sutta continues. For a noble disciple, House Lord, who wishes to have long life, beauty, happiness, fame, and rebirth in heaven, it is not proper that he should pray for long life, beauty, happiness, fame, and rebirth in heaven. He should rather follow a way of life that is conducive to long life, beauty, happiness, fame, and rebirth in heaven. So the Buddha clearly says that it is possible for one to obtain this, okay? But you need to follow a way of life. What does follow a way of life mean? You have to do something. It's not praying. It is to do something. There must be changes in your life, how you lead your life. In a way, the Buddha is pointing towards the Noble Eightfold Path. So even by following the Noble Eightfold Path, before you can attain Nibbana, you may acquire long life, beauty, happiness, fame, and rebirth in heaven. Here on this page, the Buddha emphasizes that we are responsible for our lives. It is not fate. Fate is somebody decided what will happen to you, and you can't change it. But the Buddha says your life is your responsibility. And in this particular sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 5, Sutta number 57, the Buddha says, I'm the owner of my deeds or actions, heir to my deeds. Heir meaning you inherit. You might be a billionaire in this life, but on passing, you cannot have it transferred to your next life. So what you inherit in the new life are all the actions, the earlier actions you did, whether rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, or rooted in non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. So you inherit your earlier actions. Actions are my womb. So your deeds or your actions now and earlier determine what you are born as, because the Buddha discovered under the Bodhi tree the 31 planes of existence. Human life is not the only possible destination. You can be born in lower worlds or higher worlds. So actions determine where and what you are born as. Who are your relatives and what kind of refuge you get? What kind quality? And what is your refuge? Refuge is something unpleasant that we experience. We run to get shelter. So if it's a hot day, we hopefully carry an umbrella, or we run to a building so that we can get shade. The building is our refuge against the hot weather or the wet weather, and so on. In the case of Dhamma, refuge is something that we can go towards the Dhamma for refuge from dukkha. So we have to walk the Noble Eightfold Path to obtain the results of this refuge. So refuge is the opportunity to hear and learn the Dhamma and get good teachers to explain what needs to be done, and then for you and encourage you to walk the path. That is refuge. So even karma determines whether you got a chance to even listen and learn the Dhamma. In the end, I shall be the heir of whatever deeds or actions I do, whether good or bad. So your actions determine what happens to you in the future, not your fate. And a lot of the actions you do are reflected in the karmic energies that are generated. So how is karma made? Well, this is a very important aspect. Intention, I tell you, is karma. Intending, one does karma, or one does an action or deed by way of body, speech, and mind. So intention. And this is the key aspect about why meditation is very important as taught by the Buddha. Why you want to be aware of your intention. You do not want to be walking around like robots, mindless robots. We want to be in control of your life. And coming to the important topic of aspiration. The earlier many slides painted the picture of change, of dukkha, of the realities of life, of the causes of these issues of dukkha, of the prognosis of it, and the path. And hence come to the aspect, which is at the beginning of every year, traditional societal thing, where we want to make aspiration, we want to make what they call goals for the year, for this new year. So we have an aspiration. But we need to understand what is an aspiration. In this particular print screen from a dictionary, online dictionary, clearly a strong desire to achieve something high or great. Usually it is plural, which means it can be aspiration for a number of things, not just one thing. And an object of such desire. And of course, number 2, number 3 at the bottom, there are other variations of this meaning. But an aspiration is essentially a strong desire to achieve something. A desire in which it starts with desire, hopefully you are able to put into action. That is an aspiration. And what can you do first? Yeah, here the Buddha in this particular sutta, Punya Kiriya Vatu Sutta from the Iti Vuttaka, the Buddha says, monks, there are these 3 grounds for making merit. What 3? One should train in deeds of merit, which yields long-lasting happiness. So earlier in the Ita Sutta, the Buddha talked about we want happiness in our life. We want long life and so on. So how do we achieve it? Here the Buddha says, actions that yield long-lasting happiness. And what are these actions? The action of dana, sila, bhavana. Dana meaning giving. Sila means virtue or moral training. Bhavana meaning mental development or mental cultivation. Dana, sila, bhavana are the what they call important steps. It is often portrayed as the beginning steps on your path, on the Noble Eightfold Path. So the Buddha says, continuing, by cultivating these 3 things, deeds yielding happiness, the wise person is reborn in bliss, in an untroubled, happy world. So even if you did not manage to attain enlightenment, liberation, or nibbana in this life, the person who practices dana, sila, bhavana, the wise person, this wise person is reborn in bliss. It means there's an opportunity to be born in a more fortunate existence, which brings happiness. But you are still in samsara. But these are the first steps. At least you must make your life comfortable. not full of dukkha and suffering. Elsewhere, from the Iti Vuttaka also, the Buddha says, if beings knew, as I know, the result of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would they allow the stain of meanness or stinginess to obsess them and to take root in their minds. So this is the importance of giving. And there are, of course, many suttas that explain various aspects of giving, the motivation for who should give to, when you should give, how you should give, and so on. And there are many kinds of giving, not just in this, like the picture at the bottom of Pintacara events. Pintacara meaning going on alms round, means the monastics are going on Pintacara, not just giving to monks, but there are other wholesome actions in terms of giving that you can perform also. Earlier, we talked about dana. Now we talk about sila, morality or cultivation of virtues. And often we are introduced to the 5 precepts, Pancha Sila. Earlier in the puja on this morning, we recited or reminded ourselves that we want to practice the 5 precepts. In Buddhism, there are no commandments. Commandments because the Buddha did not command us to do things. Unlike other religions where they pray to a deity, a supreme deity that commands them. In Buddhism, the Buddha does not command us. The Buddha recommends these practicing the 5 practices so that it helps us to train ourselves to be better people. The 5 precepts also have another function. It protects us. Why? Earlier you know about karma, making of merit, and so on. Now, the 5 precepts are things you should abstain from, so that if you abstain from killing, from taking what is not given, you abstain from sexual misconduct, you abstain from false speech, you abstain from taking intoxicants, you're not generating unwholesome karmic energies that boomerang back and make our life full of dukkha. So by practicing the 5 precepts, we are charting our future for a more pleasant time. Okay, it protects us. But practicing the 5 precepts is not the end, because the 5 precepts are talking about abstention. We need to do something positive to uplift our moral standing too. And the uplifting is depicted by the 5 ennoblers. Why ennoblers? Because it ennobles us. It makes us more noble. And there are 5. They are not different from the 5 precepts because they are just the nobler version of the 5 precepts. So the 5 ennoblers talking about we should save lives. We should be generous, and so on. So the 5 ennoblers are the direct opposite of the 5 precepts. It makes us more noble. The 5 precepts prevent us from making more unwholesome, unsuitable karmic energies that cause our life to be difficult. The 5 ennoblers pave the way for our more pleasant life. And what about cultivating the mind or developing the mind, the bhavana of the dana sila bhavana aspect? Here, the Buddha taught a group of first devotees who have never met the Buddha before. The Buddha taught them aspects of Brahma Vihara meditation or Brahma Vihara cultivation of the mind. Here, the sutta says, thus devoid of greed, devoid of ill will, the undeluded, alert, and resolute, keeps pervading the first direction, the east. Now, the second direction, the third direction, and the fourth direction. In Eastern world, from India onwards, I'm not sure about Afghanistan or Iran, but at least from India and eastwards, all these countries view the first direction as the east. After all, it is rising sun. The first direction is the east, the second direction is the south, the third direction is the west, the fourth direction is the north. With an awareness imbued with goodwill. What is this goodwill? Metta. And earlier in the puja, we recited the Karaniya Metta Sutta. Okay. So goodwill is metta. And by the way, this extract is from the Kalama Sutta, often known as the Sutta of don't believe this and don't believe that. But please read the whole of the Kalama Sutta, because the Kalama Sutta also, the Buddha introduces Brahma meditation to the Kalamas. And the sutta continues. Thus, he keeps pervading above, below, and all around, everywhere, in every respect, the all-encompassing cosmos, with an awareness imbued with metta, abundant, expansive, immeasurable, free from hostility, free from ill will. And the Buddha in this sutta not only talks about metta, he talks about compassion, karuna, talks about appreciation, mudita, talks about equanimity, upeka. So we have metta, karuna, mudita, and upeka forming the four Brahma Vihara. Those who are very proficient in meditating any one of these or all four of these, good meditators, they are called the Brahma Vihara, because on passing away, this individual who is well practiced is reborn in the Brahma worlds, higher than the Deva worlds. So if you think rebirth in heaven, usually the Deva worlds is fantastic. This one brings you to higher levels still, the Brahma worlds, higher than the Deva worlds. Now, in meditation, we often have various issues. And in this particular sutta, the Nivarana Sutta, now Nivarana is made up of at least two words, Nivarana and the A in front. Nivarana meaning an obstacle, or sometimes people translate it as hindrance, something that blocks you, an obstacle. Okay. Nivarana means no more obstacles or without obstacles, no more hindrances. Now, the earlier portion of this sutta talks about a person be able to meditate while listening to a Dhamma sharing. Okay, you can go, you don't have to be in a formal meditation posture for that, but just listening to a Dhamma talk or Dhamma sharing, you can also go into a meditative state. Here, the Buddha says, monks, sometimes a noble disciple pays attention, applies the mind, concentrates wholeheartedly, and actively listens to the teaching. At such a time, the five obstacles, the five hindrances are absent. So when you pay attention, you apply your mind, you concentrate wholeheartedly, you actively listen to the teaching while it's being shared, these five obstacles or five hindrances become absent, and the seven awakening factors are fully developed. The seven awakening factors are factors which help you to gain nibbana, liberation, enlightenment. So what are these five hindrances or five obstacles that are absent? When you pay attention, you apply your mind, you concentrate wholeheartedly and listen actively to the teaching. The five hindrances comprise sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and remorse, and skeptical doubt. Not just doubt, but skeptical doubt. Doubt is encouraged by the Buddha because so that when you have doubt, you can ask questions to clarify certain things. When it is skeptical doubt, okay, vichikicha, it means that even when explanations and evidence are provided, you still are strongly attached to your own views. Okay, you do not change your views in the light of evidence and so on. So sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and remorse, and doubt comprise these five hindrances or five obstacles. So these, the one I mentioned, these are the five hindrances that are absent. And what are the seven awakening factors that are fully developed? The awakening factors of mindfulness, investigation of principles, energy, rapture, tranquility, immersion, and equanimity. These are the awakening factors. So these are the seven awakening factors that are fully developed. So clearly in meditation, we encounter problems and so on. But despite the fact that Buddha taught all this, and on this page, we remind ourselves Old habits die hard. Okay. And this is a common idiom used in the English language. And what does it mean? It means it is used to say that it is hard to stop doing things that one has been doing for a long time. And here I would like to add, long time is our time in samsara. We have had a long time to be expert in all these bad habits. And to get rid of all these bad habits, it gives us we need to put in a lot of effort, a lot of concentrated and concerted effort to get rid of all these bad habits. Hence the word old habits die hard. So we are literally moving against the stream. Okay. So it is hard work to get rid of all these bad habits, all these defilements and so on. Now, the balance of this morning sharing will be talking about not how, what are the various tools, but on what we need to do to remind ourselves that we need to put in the effort to walk the path, to get rid of the tanha, craving. So here in this particular sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya Book of 5, Sutta number 57, the Buddha says, there are these 5 facts that one should reflect on often. Now, reflection is a very, very important tool used, taught by the Buddha for us to remind ourselves, to stir up energy, to encourage ourselves. Why? So that we can put into practice what we aspire for as good Buddhists. So reflection helps you to remind ourselves to put more fuel into our aspiration so that we can walk the path. Okay, because old habits die hard. It's a difficult time. So reflection on often helps. So here the sutta continues. Reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. So even monks and nuns must also do this, not just lay people. Which 5? I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. This is the first fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness, and so on. I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. And again, this familiar verse, I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging? So the Buddha explains further. There are beings who are intoxicated with a typical young person's intoxication with youth. Because of that intoxication with youth, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, speech, and mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that youth's intoxication with youth will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. So this reflection will help that infatuation to grow weaker and finally entirely abandoned. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect? I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness. So there are beings that are intoxicated with a typical healthy person's intoxication with health. Some people view the fact that they haven't fallen sick a day in their life. That is a boast that many people put forward. Now, because of that intoxication with health, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, speech, and mind. But when they often reflect on the fact that they are subject to illness, okay, what happens? This infatuation, this intoxication with health will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. So we are chipping at all these, old, strong habits which we have been cultivating in samsara. And the Buddha continues, I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. And there are beings who are intoxicated with a living person's intoxication with life. Right through history, we can see a lot of powerful people intoxicated with life. Like in China, we hear of cases where they employ people, the alchemists, to concoct the elixir of life so that they can live forever. These are the people who are intoxicated with life. They want to live forever. So because of that, they may conduct themselves in a bad way in body, speech, and mind. And when they often reflect on that fact, that living person's intoxication with life will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. And similarly, the Buddha talks about, I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. There are beings who feel desire and passion for the things they find dear and appealing. Because of that passion, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, speech, and mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, their passion, will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. And further, the Buddha says, I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related to my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do, for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir. So there are beings who conduct themselves in a bad way in body, speech, and mind. So if they reflect on this often, they will either entirely, abandon this view or let this view grow weaker. Now, the analysis by the Buddha goes further. I am not the only one subject to aging. Now, instead of looking at yourself, you look at others too. The truth that is abundant around us. I'm not the only one subject to aging who has not gone beyond aging, to the extent that there are beings, past and future, passing away and re-arising. All beings are subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. So when he or she often reflects on this, the factors of the path take birth. He or she sticks with that path, develops it, cultivates it. As he or she sticks with that path, develops it and cultivates it, the fetters that bind you to this cycle of birth and death are abandoned. The obsessions are destroyed. And the Buddha goes through the analysis for, I'm not the only one subject to illness. I'm not the only one subject to death. I'm not the only one who will grow different. I'm not the only one who is the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, and so on. Now, while these are the 5 important reflections which we should perform daily, this page emphasizes another important aspect. Because the walking the path, although we have to walk alone, often we think we have to walk alone, is not necessarily so. And here comes the important thing. We can walk together with friends, like-minded friends. Hence, the Buddha emphasized in this Upada Sutta, here, the situation was such that one day, Venerable Ānanda, the Buddha's closest disciple or his attendant, came up to the Buddha and said, this is half of the holy life, Lord. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie. And the Buddha replied, that's not so. Say not so, Ananda. It is not half of the holy life. It is the whole of the holy life. So, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is the whole of the holy life, even among the monastics, let alone the lay people. And here the Buddha emphasizes, when the monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and colleagues, he can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path. So clearly, we need to gather a group of Kalyanamitas or good friends or admirable friends to walk together with us on this Noble Eightfold Path. Why? Because they encourage us. We may lapse in our concentration, our purpose, our aspiration. We have forgotten momentarily our aspiration, and it is our friends who are ever mindful that reminds us. Or if your friend or friends are unmindful, you are the one who reminds them. So we encourage each other. Hence the importance of friends walking the Noble Eightfold Path. And since today's topic is about aspiration, very often towards the end of any wholesome puja or Dhamma talk or session, we often reflect on this, the Suhamita partner aspiration for spiritual friends. Imena punya kamena mami bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. By the grace of this merit, here underlying merit, the Pali word is punya, that I have acquired, may I never follow foolish friends. Foolish, in this case, bala, foolish friends. Foolish meaning those who are not walking the path. Now, but only the good and spiritual friends until I attain the final goal, Nibbana. So this is what they call, even ending of a wholesome session, we still recite this particular verse to remind ourselves that we need to walk together. May I have good friends, good and spiritual friends to walk together to reach this final goal. So clearly this path, although we need to walk alone, to gain enlightenment alone, but we can always round up good and spiritual friends to walk together, to help each other so that we can achieve this aspiration. Now, this journey is gradual. Any practice, any development of skill, of learning even to stand up like a toddler needing to learn how to stand up and walk, for us to learn to play a game like badminton and so on. Everything takes time. It has to be step by step. And in this particular sutta, the Buddha says, just as the ocean has a gradual shelf, a gradual slope, a gradual inclination with a sudden drop-off only after a long stretch, in the same way, this doctrine and discipline, or Dhamma Vinaya, has a gradual training, a gradual performance, a gradual progression with a penetration to enlightenment only after a long stretch. So it is a long path. It takes time. It is gradual. So do not expect it to be like fast food. Everything is at a snap of a finger, come to you straight away. You have to take things step by step with your friends. So this being the last slide for this morning's sharing, that I should remind all those present, the teaching of the Buddhas. Sabba papasa akaranang kusalasa upasampada sacitta paridapanang etang buddhana sasana. That we should avoid all evil, that we should do good, purify our minds. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. And this is a good reminder found in Dhammapada verse 183. Sat Dhammo Cirang Titatu. May the good doctrine long endure. Sappe Satta Sukhi Hontu. May all beings be happy. Thank you for your ears. Back to the MC.
Thank you, Brother Ananda Fong, for today's sharing. Let us dedicate those merits accrued to all beings seen and unseen. Idang me nya tinang ho tu sukita hontu nya tayo. Idang me nya tinang ho tu sukita hontu nya tayo. Idang me nya tinang ho tu sukita hontu nya tayo. Aspiration. Imina punya kamena ma me bala samagamo Satang samagamo hotu yavanibbana pattiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.